This channel's called the Fergus Review Channel. The Fergus Review Channel! And I've barely done any reviews on here as of late. But all of that is about to change. Him. I said all of that is about to change. You guys clearly didn't hear me.
Fast and the Furious.
Yep, I'm gonna take a look at that crazy car franchise, Fast and Furious. What started off as a simple character-driven crime thriller has now transformed itself into a massive action blockbuster franchise. And it's taken itself to crazy places, from cars driving on ice and even cars going all the way to space. Yep, that's how crazy it gets. But in all seriousness, I love this franchise. Not only does it have a lot of stuff going for it across all of the movies, but I can also tell that even though it's going to be hard to do, I'm going to have a lot of fun analyzing this franchise, because I just love the individual movies, and I love the overarching story. Oh my god, I just cannot wait to get into this franchise! So, in this mini-series, I'm going to be going through all of the Fast and Furious movies in order of their release, as each episode will be dedicated to a specific group of these movies. And I can tell that going through this franchise is going to be a fun ride, as we are going straight from the original Fast and the Furious all the way up to the most recent film in the franchise with Fast X. We will be looking at movies with tons of crazy action, hysterical humor, lovable characters, hard-hitting emotion, and you might learn a little something about their overarching story. Anyways, we have 11 films to get into, so let's get right to it. So, grab your favorite snack, get comfortable, and sit back as we start this retrospective on the Fast and Furious franchise. But of course, before we get to the franchise's real crazy moments, let's start off with...
World, please believe y'all ain't real. Please believe it's murder. Please believe.
The Fast and the Furious. I'm gonna be honest up front about this movie. It's gonna be quite hard to talk about a movie that's this influential in pop culture, but I'll try my best. Anyway, yeah, The Fast and the Furious is an amazing movie that's just right up my alley. It's simple with not much of a story, but it really makes up for that with being more character-focused, which I honestly really want to see more films do, because in The Fast and the Furious, it really does work, because I love these characters. I love Dom and Brian and Mia and Letty and Jesse. I love these guys, and it really does help me root for them, because I love their interactions. I love seeing them bounce off each other, sharing witty banter, and talking about cars together. And I got invested to the point that I really didn't want to see Brian bust Dom and his family, because they trust him, and he trusts them, and it's clearly shown throughout the movie. Paul Walker and Vin Diesel are also fantastic in the movie, making Dom and Brian's relationship all the more believable. Their performances make their characters' personalities shine, and it really does sell that Dom and Brian actually grow to be friends throughout the movie. Brian and Mia's romance is also very sweet. The two have some great chemistry together, and by the end of the movie in particular, it gets really investing. It got me invested in the characters and what they go through. And once again, it's a relatively simple movie with not much of a story to it, and more so focused on just being character-driven, pun intended. Oh, come on! It's Fast and Furious! Why am I not allowed to make car puns? Anyway, with a movie as simple as this, I have this much to analyze about. And that's not even including, yeah. Let's just not say it. I mean, it's very little in comparison to the later installments. But I'm surprised that I found quite a bit to analyze about this movie. I mean, the later films are much more complex with an overarching story told throughout. And I'm surprised that those movies have a lot to analyze about them, and that the relatively simpler first film with not that much to talk about still has a good amount of content worth analyzing about. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned the racing scenes yet. Those scenes are quite fun and really intense. And when they get good, they're a real blast to watch. Although, this is probably where I'm gonna put up a spoiler warning for this movie, as I can't go into what I have left to analyze about this movie without going into spoilers. So, if you have yet to see this movie and don't want it spoiled for you, skip to this part of the video. Now, there's one crazy scene towards the end of the movie that I just have to talk about. So while Dom and his family are pulling off a heist on a truck, Vince gets his arm stuck on wire and really gets it stuck on there. And keep in mind that this movie is only rated M, or PG-13 for my American viewers. And in this shot, just look at Vince's arm. Ouch! That is nasty detail for a PG-13 movie. And that's only part of what the franchise is able to get away with. Anyways, yeah, Vince's arm is really stuck on there, as shown by the bloody detail. But then another family member ends up getting into a brutal accident. And as soon as that happens, Dom tells Leon to pull back for Letty. He obliges, he saves Letty, and Letty spits out blood. Yep. And then Brian and Mia come in, and they're actually the ones who get Vince off the wire. Well, specifically Brian. He tells Mia to take the wheel, and then he jumps onto the truck, unties Vince's arm from the wire, tosses Vince to the car, and then jumps back to the car himself just when the truck driver is about to shoot him. I'm telling you, man, people say that the movies have gotten too crazy as they went along, when we already got very crazy scenes as early as the first movie. Anyway, when Dom, Leon, and Letty make their way to the scene, Mia and Brian are keeping Vince alive while he's on the edge of death. Oh, I said on the edge of death, not beyond the realms of death. Judas Priest. Wait, what? Anyway, Brian calls for medical attention for Vince. A helicopter then arrives, rushing Vince to the hospital. So yeah, just from that crazy truck heist, 2 family members got injured. And now one of them has been rushed to the hospital. And that's not even the biggest problem they have to deal with.
Hurry! Oh no, Jesse! Come on! Jesse!
Look, I'm sorry, I just had to do that edit. I couldn't resist. Ow. Okay, now with you guys trying to kill me out of the way, yeah, Jesse returns after running off during a race. But then Johnny Tran and his biker gang come in and they shoot at the Toretto's house, and Tran just guns down Jesse. Now, Jesse's death is one of the biggest things to talk about in this movie, because it is a major moment. You'll see later on in the franchise that whenever they try to kill off a major character, we don't see their deaths fully happen on screen, so it could be believable when they bring them back. Yeah, no, you just can't do that with Jesse here. We literally see him being gunned down. We literally see the body. There is no way you can bring him back somehow. Although the last time that we see his body is when Dom leaves it with Mia. So maybe in one of the final 2 movies they could explain that Mia somehow got him to the hospital and told him to stay hidden for all these years. But that's just what they could do. I don't actually want them to take that seriously. Because Jesse's death still hit me hard, man. I felt so bad for him. I mean, literally, not only did he come back from just running away after a race, but I also just love his character. He's fun, weird, and I also relate to his motivations. I mean, literally, when I tried to go to a school, they always let me down, so I just turned my back on that and just switched to working on videos. I mean, like how Jesse's good at engineering, I'm good at making videos. That's what I do best. Making him a somewhat relatable character to me. So when Johnny Tran just guns him down after just coming back to Dom, and when Dom and Mia just hug his body, man, I felt that. Plus, bringing Jesse back would be tricky since the franchise has changed so much and Jesse's been dead for 10 movies. So bringing him back would be honestly kind of stupid. But still, when it happened, I wanted one thing to be sure. Johnny Tran's gotta die next. And well, Brian thought so too, as he goes off in his car to look for Tran. Dom also decides to catch up to Brian in his Dodge Charger. I mean, it's understandable why Brian would want to do this. I mean, not only did Tran just kill Jesse, but him and his gang also blew up Brian's car at an earlier point in the movie. So yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say at this point that So Brian is chasing down Johnny Tran and his friend, and just at that moment... Dom comes in and knocks Johnny Tran's friend right off course. And in a pretty brutal crash too. And then as Dom looks over with us, he's just fine? Like after a brutal bike crash, he's just resting there. But man, does that mean he's gonna be surprised when he finds out what happened to Johnny. But I'm getting ahead of myself. With his friend off course, Johnny keeps running from Brian. But because Johnny plays daddy, he decides to start shooting at Brian. That is until...
Fire, you son of a...
Yep, just like when Johnny Tran shot Jesse, Brian whipped out his gun and shot Johnny Tran. And just in case you don't believe he's dead, Brian runs through traffic for some reason, goes over to Johnny, and he shows no signs of life. Yes guys, Brian literally shot and killed Johnny Tran right in the middle of the road. Come on Brian, even though he killed your friend, that doesn't mean you have to kill him on the road. The police might find his body or something. And Brian just leaves it there. And no, this isn't criticizing the movie. I'm just thinking Brian went a little overkill with the way he killed Johnny. Brian just shot him in the middle of the road and just left his body to sit there, not even taking care of the evidence. But with Johnny dead, Brian rushes back to Dom to arrest him. But then when he goes up to Dom, Dom tells him a little something.
I used to drag here back in high school. That railroad crossing up there is exactly a quarter mile away from here. On Green, I'm going for it.
I mean, of course, we all know Dom said that because he lives his life a quarter mile at a time.
I live my life a quarter mile at a time.
No, but really, this is of course Dom challenging Brian to one last quarter mile race. Brian accepts Dom's invitation, the two have their engines, and on the green light, they go for it. And they're off! Oh no, there's a train on the rails!
They're entering turn 3! I don't believe what I'm watching, Bob!
They're coming close to the train!
Grounding turn 4! And there it is drifting up! It's too close to call! I don't believe it! Close to call! The most spectacular, amazing, unequivocally unbelievable ending in the history of the world! And we don't even know who won!
Wow, that took a while to edit. Please like this episode, guys. Just editing it alone is just making me so tired. No pun intended this time. But anyway, after Brian wins that quarter mile race, him and Dom just keep on driving, and then... Like literally, what just happened? Dodge Chargers are basically what are referred to as Dom's main car. They're what he usually drives in these movies to usually get himself out of a sticky situation. So to see that Dom has a Dodge Charger as early as the first movie, I thought that was cool. But the reason why I was so shocked when Dom ended up crashing his Dodge Charger in this movie is because I wasn't aware about the fact that in the franchise they don't bring the exact same cars from one movie to the next. But yeah, anyways, Dom ends up crashing his Dodge Charger, and Brian goes to the wrecked car to see if Dom is alright. Which luckily he is alright, but he is injured. And the only thing he has left to say after his crash is...
That's not what I had in mind.
But when Brian helps Dom out of his wrecked car, they hear the police. And since Brian does feel like he is family to Dom, he gives Dom the keys to his 10-second car and lets him get away.
You know what you're doing?
I owe you a 10-second car.
leaving Dom and Brian on good terms. And it's so satisfying to see after what Dom and Brian have been through in this movie. With Brian's feelings with Mia, and Brian and Dom actually becoming good friends themselves throughout the movie, it truly makes Brian family. And family is family to the Torettos no matter what. That's their whole thing. Because even though they're criminals, they're still family, and they're a family of people. Real people who all care for each other. Usually in media, criminals aren't depicted as actual caring people. They're usually just depicted as purely evil people who commit crimes. But this film actually makes its criminal leads sympathetic. It actually gives them personalities and relationships that real people would have. It spends the majority of its time getting to know the characters. We get to see what they're actually like, and what they do for a living, and how they contrast to each other. And how real and sympathetic they feel adds to the fact that they care for each other. And even with their contrasting personalities, they're still family, and they're a family that cares for each other. And when they let that family down, then they'd be willing to redeem themselves for it. And this is what makes The Fast and the Furious such a good movie. Sure, there's a lot of the drag racing and action scenes that people would expect, but there's also a lot of genuine character development and themes of family that's not just the emotional core of this movie, it's also the emotional core of the entire franchise. And it's what helps make the characters likable. Yes, they may be criminals, but they're still real sympathetic people. People who are actually given personalities, depth, and development. That is the heart of the movie, and it really shines through in it. The film also has a good standalone conclusion. Dom and Brian are on good terms, and as Dom rides off in his new 10-second car, Brian walks off to the police. The end. Well, for now at least. But yeah, The Fast and the Furious is amazing. Yes, it's a very simple movie, but it also has a great amount of charm and some clear heart and effort. And I'm just so bummed that people look over this movie because of the rest of the franchise. Because there really are a lot of people out there who let one get overshadowed by the other films in the franchise. One has great characters, intense action sequences, intense races, iconic quotes,
I live my life a quarter mile at a time.
genuine heart, and very risky use of its rating. It just has a lot of great stuff that the later movies also do well. It's an all-time iconic classic, even if it is heavily 2001. Things are looking good for the franchise, and from here, it can only go up and down over and over again. Anyway, on to the sequels. The eventually crazy and over-the-top sequels. Oh, but first I need to shave. That's better. Anyway,